The houseplant hobby is entering a new phase. Stick around with me and let me tell you about some of my predictions for 2026. Hi, my name is Memo, this is my channel, Houseplantygoodness, and essentially it's a place where I like to geek out about my big passion. You might be able to see some of it behind me, it's tropical houseplants. So yes, the hobby is changing for sure. What I'm going to be sharing about today isn't just predictions. These are going to be things that I'm noticing that are pattern based. So X equals Y. And I think that this is going to be something that people are going to find quite interesting. If you've got your own set of predictions for this following year, please do share so down below and let's have that conversation. It's interesting to kind of imagine where the hobby is going to be going in this next year or next few years. But what I'm going to be basing my prediction is on changes in buying behavior that I am seeing not just from myself, but what I'm seeing from all of you that are sharing in my comments, talking to me on Instagram, all of these things. I'm seeing a change in buying behavior, and I'm going to touch on that in a bit more detail in this video. There's also a slight shift in care conversations, what care people are giving their plants or what care they are willing to give to their plants as well. And we'll kind of touch a bit as well on kind of what people might be struggling with now versus 3 to 4 years ago. But what has changed in the last year? And this is going to be kind of the foundational basis of some of the things that I'm going to be talking about that's going to really highlight why predictions like this matter, or at least these inferences are going to matter moving forward within the houseplant hobby. Again, these are all just my opinions, but as I said, I'm basing most of these on kind of evidence of things that I'm seeing happening. So briefly, one of the things that I am seeing is I'm seeing a lot less impulse buys. It's just not happening as much as it would have been happening. And obviously, I can't ever talk about trends and predictions without talking about the huge boom that happened in the houseplants world during the pandemic. We've all kind of touched on this ad nauseum, but yes, obviously that was the craziness and the big kind of up that happened. And we saw a lot of people impulse buying then, but that has really reduced to almost very, very small numbers at this particular moment in time. There is also a lot more plant fatigue and burnout. So you can see a lot of even your favorite content creators downsizing or minimizing their collections, or just kind of saying a lot of the kind of average people out there that have got houseplant collectors going, I can't have 700 plants anymore. I've got a life, I've got a job, I've got to be out of the house. Things are different to what they would have been in the pandemic. They're still different to what they would have even been a year ago. There's also things like rising costs, soil, utilities, all of these things are gonna add up into the case that most people can't even afford to do what they were doing before or care or purchase certain types of plants. There is definitely a lower tolerance for high maintenance plants. There was a much bigger tolerance, or there has been for a while, of kind of going, oh, I'm going to get this high maintenance plants and it's fine, and I'm going to pour all of my time and effort into trying to make this happy and trying to make sure that I tick up all of the boxes to make sure that this is thriving in my space. Again, using the pandemic example, there was a lot of people that were willing to put up with a lot of very prima donna and drama queen type plants because at that point, that was their source of income. Also, they had all the time in the world to focus on keeping some of these plants super, super happy. That might not be the case anymore. And there is definitely a shift from aesthetics, so the perfectly manicured collection, the perfectly manicured plants, to longevity. So a lot of people have asked about certain plants that might be having a bit of crispy things. I've never had that much of an issue with mine not looking perfect. But even a few years back, I was one of the minority of people out there. And I knew a lot of other people that might be showing their collections and showcasing some of their plants online, and the level of manicuring that they would do, and it would stress them out. Everything had to be absolutely this way and perfect and all these things. that isn't happening anywhere near as much as it used to anymore. And I don't think that's going to be changing. I think that's the trend. That's how things are kind of walking, kind of evolving further down the line, is that more people are just going to be going, I value a plant that I have had for months and years, and it's going there and it's going to keep on going, and you're investing in a bit of what will hopefully turn into heirloom plants, either for yourself or if you get tired of them, for somebody else that might inherit them after you or purchase them after you, more so than you are going for the aesthetic vibe. But let's go into some tangible predictions as to my top 5 predictions for the next year. So the first big one, and this links to what I was just talking about now, is the survival versus rarity change. And it will be a lot more people looking for the survival of plants rather than just the rarity. That flex era is pretty much almost entirely dead at this point. The notion of rare plants peaked years ago, and I use rare plants in quote marks, and I think it's one of those things that I don't tend to like to use that sentence as much as other people might do, and it's an easy word to use because people recognize it, but these plants, I cannot move away from my scientific background, and after talking to quite a lot of botanists, these plants that we consider rare are not rare. Not in nature. They are just rare to us because we can't find them easily. All of these things, they're not necessarily rare plants. They are rare within the market, and I work in marketing long enough to be able to spot a good marketing term from a mile away. Slap the word rare on any kind of plant at this point in time and you can hike up the prices, but people have become a lot more aware of this, and they've got a lot less tolerance for it as well. The other big thing that's linked into this as well, that kind of flex era, is that variegation doesn't necessarily mean status anymore. So you would get plants before that were variegated because there was a certain status with them. Look, I've got this plant, and it's not just a difficult plant to find, I've got the variegated plant, which is even harder to find. That doesn't exist so much anymore. You're getting more people these days, and at least from what I'm noticing, that are getting variegated plants because they like the look of the variegated plant, not just because it's a rarer form of an already rare plant. Do you see what I mean? And we're seeing more and more people these days selling off their problem plants. It's very obvious a lot of the time. Some of them are actually quite honest about it, and I think that's a good thing that you're getting. They're just like, this is a plant that I've struggled with. Please take it. Either for free or I'm selling it, and it could be somebody else's problem or somebody else's joy, because what might be difficult to me might not be for somebody else, and that's completely fine. And that's how these plants are still kind of in circulation, because people want to attempt it. But the reality, I think, moving into 2026 is the plants are chosen for their longevity, I think, their tolerance to different conditions, and their forgiveness. So plants that are, people are a lot rediscovering, so to speak, some plants that have been on the market for decades, and certain pothos plants, sansevierias, all of these things that have been here for a while, because they know that there's a guaranteed of longevity, they're much more tolerant of situations. All of these things means that people are rediscovering what used to be the common plants now, because they know that there's a reason to invest in those. They won't disappoint them, if that makes sense. And the new big flex isn't that, look at this plant that I've got that nobody else has got. It's just like, look at this plant that I've had growing happily for 5 years. There's a difference in mindset there. And what used to be rarity plus price equals the value of the price before, these days and moving forward into 2026, I at least predict that it's going to be more the stability plus the success equals the value of that plant. Make sense? I think there's also going to be less shame, and I'm seeing this more and more these days, of people saying, nope, I killed that plant. And there's going to be more value placed upon keeping things like more basic plants alive for longer. Like, look at this pothos that I have kept alive for 20 years. It was my family's, they then gifted it to me, and I'm still keeping it happy. Just see how things are slightly changing there. My number 2 prediction is low light and small space plants are on the up, and they will stay on the up, I would imagine. But why do I think this is happening? I think there's more people living in kind of smaller apartments because of financial reasons. People, especially my generation and younger generations, the fairy tale that you're going to be able to buy a house and move to a bigger house and a bigger house and a bigger house, this and this and this, and I'm just like, that doesn't exist anymore. Like, you talk to some people like my parents who are, I think in essence, I think both my parents are boomers, but of a certain age, where by this point they would have moved over to the second or third house, and they're just like, how are you in your, like, you've just turned 40 and you've only just bought a house a couple of years ago. We would have been on a second or third house. I'm just like, because it's not possible to get it any earlier. It's too expensive and the salaries are not what they used to be. That leads me on to the second point here, is that people are not shifting up as much as they would have done in previous years. People are staying put for a lot longer within these smaller spaces. And a lot more people are coming to the realization that these smaller spaces, these cheaper places that they're living in, don't have high light levels. They don't have huge big windows. A lot of people are realizing that actually my space truly is a low to medium light space, and it will never be that bright indirect light space. So they have to adjust and start thinking of their collection and future plants in that sense as well. So in 2026, I do think that there's going to be more of a shift towards more compact growth, things that stay smaller. So think things like maybe the peperomias might have a bit of a resurgence again. Things that don't get absolutely huge. Like, it's unlikely that a lot of people are going to be getting these plants that are going to get massive because they don't have the space necessarily to put them. So more diminutive plants, or plants that stay smaller, are probably going to be coming into play a bit more. And actually I'm seeing a bit more of a trend. I'll give you an example of a plant. I'm seeing a bit more of a trend of, say, the staghorn ferns. And it's nice that staghorn ferns as a group are having their moment at the moment. But a lot of people who might have not been choosing to get something like a more traditional kind of the easily available staghorn ferns before, because they're just like, where am I going to put it? They're now getting options. There's more species coming to the market which are more diminutive staghorn ferns, which stay smaller, and they have exploded. There's a lot of demand for them. And again, I think this links into those smaller spaces and lower light conditions. Alongside the more diminutive size, you're going to be getting people that are looking for slower growth in plants. They could go for something that can get big, but instead of something that can get big and get big fast, they might go for something that gets big but maybe doesn't get big too fast. So they are kind of hedging their bets and thinking ahead and going, okay, you know what, I might not be moving this year or next year to a big space, but I'm hoping in 5 years' time. So actually, if this plant takes its time to get big, by the time it gets big, I'll be moving. Do you see the difference there? And also plants that don't need constant adjustment. So I'm seeing a lot of people that have for a long time, but they're getting even louder these days. And I hear you all, and I understand the reason, where they're just like, I don't want to deal with a moss pole. That's too much of a faff. I want something that's nice and simple. And again, that links into what I was talking, the very first prediction, is the more lower maintenance and highest chance of success plants. Looking at this specific prediction, what's maybe changed is getting plants that are all for bright indirect light, versus now where you're just like, well, what plant will survive with just 6 hours of light this far away from the window? Does that make sense? There's a difference in how we adjust in what we need, because our conditions have also changed as well. And I also did a low light video when I've been filming this one today, so that will be coming up in the next week or two. Please keep an eye out for that, and I give you some of my tips there for those lower light conditions, whether it's because of seasonality like the winter, or because you've only got lower light conditions in your space. My third prediction is the decollection of plants, which links into fewer plants, better care. And it's that kind of notion that I couldn't possibly do 600 plants anymore. I'm not going to give them the care that they need. I'm busy, my conditions have changed, all of these things. I need to bring it back down. And it's interesting because a lot of people have started changing some of the terminology here. So instead of saying plant collectors, and I think it might have even been, I think Tanya wasn't the first person that I've heard this, and I did an amazing podcast kind of chat with both Tanya and Jos, who I've done videos with in the past, both with Tanya's collection, and she was unboxing, and that was a long time ago, and Jos recently when we were talking about Anthurium hybrids. And I'll link down below the podcast episode as well. If you haven't heard it, you can go and check it out. And she was saying, I'm no longer a collector, I am a plant curator. And that kind of, she's not the only one. I love that terminology. I think I've heard it from a few other people as well. There is that move towards that de-collection. So a lot of people in the past year already, heavily so, it's been happening for a while, but even more so in the past year, have started downsizing their collections. They have started to kind of give away or sell duplicate plants. They don't need 15 or 2 or 3 of the same plant. And a lot of people are actually now almost flipping everything on its side, because before everything was buy, and I must have this plant and this plant and this plant. And it's more like, oh, I'm going to spend my time like gifting plant. Here's a gift for you, and here's another plant for you. Like it's all coming down to that curation rather than collection. And kind of what I'm thinking 2026 is going to be more like is things that are much more intentional now. So smaller, more intentional collections. So the people that have been doing this for a while, we all might start focusing a bit more on certain genuses. So if somebody's really comfortable with philodendrons, they're just like, you know what, I've tried everything else now. I'm really comfortable with philodendron. I just want to stay with philodendron. Or I just want to stay with monstera. Or I just want to stay with anthurium. It just makes my life easier and I can hyper-focus on that one genus. Or it could be based on light level, or I'm only going to be looking at low light plants, or only a bright indirect light plants. They'll usually find something that has made their lives easier and they kind of vibe well with it and they can do it easily enough, and they'll stick to that because it's just easier to be a curator when it's hyper-focused rather than a collector, which will be the whole Pokemon of it all. I'm just like, I must collect them all. There is still going to be some of that, especially for the people that are just focusing on genuses, because they might just go, okay, you know what? I've got this philodendron and these variants of this philodendron. I want to have all of them, but I'm still only going to have philodendrons in my collection. You can still get that Pokemon thing that some people really enjoy, but without it getting crazy and out of control. And I keep pointing around my collection because, you know, there's going to be more people as well that are looking forward to spending a bit more time and paying a bit more attention to individual plants. When you've got things like big collections with 600 plants, it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to hyper-focus and really give the attention that each plant needs individually. But smaller collections, that decluttering of collections, will really give them all that space and that breathing space to be able to do more kind of personalized care if they wanted to for individual plants. And obviously there's less of that novelty chasing. That's been happening for a long time now, but I think that's coming to its death at this particular moment in time, where it's just like, this is a trending plant, I must have it. How many people, I want to see down below in the comments, got burned by super trendy plants? The Melanochrysum or the Melanochrysys, the Queen Anthurium, certain variegated plants that everybody had to have, and everybody kind of spent a lot of time, emotion, and money, and did not want to do it, and they've been burnt, and they're just like, never again. Let me know yours down below. And I think the big thing with this prediction is that the plant hobby is becoming more emotionally sustainable rather than just environmentally sustainable. It's something that is just like, yes, I can't do 600 plants anymore, but I can do, and I will probably enjoy doing 100 plants again. So it's things like that that I think are really going to start shifting quite drastically. It's been happening for a while. You can see now why I said prediction-based, not prediction-based, but kind of data-based predictions for 2026 is because this has been happening for a while, and I think we are kind of getting to that big point of this now. Prediction number 4 is that the education on plants becomes the product itself, if that makes sense. And I'll explain this a bit more so that kind of it's easier to understand. So what is changing with this is people are tired of one-size-fits-all advice. That makes sense, yeah? I've said this, a lot of the other plant content creators have always said this. We can only give you our experiences and our advice based on our care, but all of it is going to be unique. People are tired of conflicting plant advice or viral hacks and trends and things like that. And there is value in kind of stepping away from that. And I'll come back to the kind of more personalized care where it's not one size fits all. And I do appreciate, this is not me calling out, by the way, this was a great comment that I got in one of my recent videos where one of the followers who watches my channel is kind of saying, oh yes, one of the things that she did is off the back of my advice. I think it was a Scindapsus moonlight. And I was saying, in my experience, it was a plant that I needed to let dry out fully so I didn't have any root rot. And I think her experiences, obviously her conditions, her care were different than mine. That plant that she had, which she followed that advice, didn't work. And it wouldn't because we're not having the same conditions. So, and I do appreciate, and as I said, this wasn't me calling that individual out. I appreciate comments like this because, and especially good for other people to see this in the comments, to really drive home the reality that advice is going to be unique to your care. The best that we can all do as well when we're creating our content is tell you what we're experiencing, to at least give you a bit of a hint as to what might work, but ultimately critical thinking and judging your space and your conditions and adapting to it is when you truly become your own planty experts at that point. Like taking that and riffing it or changing it or flipping it on its head because that works for you. And people are just sick and tired of that one size fits all. It doesn't. It really doesn't. So what am I thinking of for 2026 with this prediction is that context becomes key. So more people, and I'm hoping that I've been doing that a bit over the years, and I know people that have been watching my channel are sick and tired of my caveats saying in my experience, in my conditions, with the care that I give, this might be different and mileage might vary. I know you're sick and tired of me saying this, but I'm saying this because I don't have the same exact people watching the same exact videos every week to know that, you know what, like I'm not a teacher in a classroom where it's the same 20 students every time that I come into that classroom to know that there's continuity. Somebody might be watching my video that has never watched it before. They need to know that context before they take it on for face value. That's the thing that I mean. Context is going to be key. And I could always give context, and I think more people are going to start giving context and saying, this is the care that I give my plants, but these are my conditions. The other big thing as well, and again, I've done a few videos that are going to be coming out this month, seasonality is key, and people making adjustments for seasonality is going to be something that's going to be discussed and put into practice a lot more in 2026 than it has done in previous years. It has been something that people are becoming more and more aware. I know me and a lot of the other people that have been doing content for years, when we kind of try to remind people about adjustments that might need to happen seasonally, in previous years, there was a lot of people going, oh yeah, I need to do that. I know, yeah. Whilst now there's a lot more people going, yes, I know, and I've already been doing this, but maybe I could do this. There's already a shift in mindset, which is great because it kind of means that we're adjusting the care based on the environment that is changing. And I'm thinking there's going to be more interest in long form explanations, something like this video where we can really get into the nitty gritty of things. Things even like last year and the year before, they were a bit more on the superficial side to kind of get that content and get that information out. And it all becomes a bit repetitive. It all becomes a bit like we've all talked about this ad nauseum. There's only so many new ways that we can say the same 5 things over and over again. Whilst I think moving now, going into more detailed context isn't just going to be more valuable for everybody there, but I think it's going to create more of that discussion and more of that awareness rather than just skimming the surface and doing the same 15, 20 things over and over and over again. There is probably going to be less of do this one trick, and there's going to be more of help me understand why. And I saw this as well when I was doing a series of videos. There's now a series of videos. There's going to be more of that coming soon, which were more science-based videos, which I really didn't think they were going to do as well as they have done, truthfully, because I didn't think there was that much interest. But I'm seeing that there's a lot more people that want those deeper dives. They want to understand the why rather than just the result of something. So I think we're going to see more of that coming out soon in terms of kind of the educational side of the planty hobby. And my fifth prediction is going to be that realism replaces that aesthetic, that perfection aesthetic that we've been seeing for a while. And I know this has been the trend for some time now, but those picture perfect Instagram posts, less so. People are probably, and they are, I'm seeing this a lot more, showing plants that might not be perfect and explaining why they're not be perfect. And even if they are showing a plant that is perfect, usually the description below is them going on, this is not always the way that this plant has been. This has taken me months or weeks to get here. And these are all the other things that I had to do. And I think there's going to be more of that true reality rather than the super polishedness of it all. That constant kind of view of all of my leaves are absolutely pristine in these plants. People are realizing that that is not true most of the time, or it's kind of something that they're just not so keen on. And you can see this based on how some people are experiencing certain types of social media, for example. So I'll give you a very specific example on this. So during the big hype era of Instagram, everything was perfect. Everything needed to look aesthetically perfect because people were editing. And none of those pictures, even back then, not just for plants, were 100% true because people were tweaking and doing. And people towards the end of that perfection era were telling people this is all the things we've been doing in order for that thing to look so perfect as it did. And then the pandemic happened, and then TikTok and that kind of generation kind of started coming up. And the idea of TikTok is that we are leaving behind that perfection and we're all just going to be a bit silly online. And this is the kind of boring reality, but the level of how much people embrace that, and now Instagram has got Reels and YouTube has got Shorts and all of these things, they are pulling off the back of that, not just that we have less and less attention these days, but it's that kind of unrefinedness that people are desperate for because everybody's sick and tired of, in our situation, perfect leaves. Also, there's going to be a move away from that shame of pests or disease and all of these things where it literally was like a dirty secret that everybody would say, I'm just like, oh, I've got mealybugs on this plant, or I've got spider mites on mine. I can't believe I've got like fungus gnats and all of these things. That doesn't exist anymore. People are saying it with their entire chest and just going, I've got this problem, mine are not perfect, I know yours are not perfect. What have your experience has been? Please tell me because we need to help each other here, yes. That's a good thing. That's a healthy way of us acting a bit more like a community and supporting each other through dealing with things like pest, disease, all of these things. So yeah, what's all that being replaced with in this coming year is kind of more plant honesty. Not all plant leaves are going to be pristine. There's going to be some browning, there's going to be some crispiness, there's going to be some yellow leaves. That is normal. Seeing things like visible pest damage, this one doesn't have any pests at the moment, but seeing plants that have got visible pest damage on there, because you know what? Pests happen. Pests happen to everybody eventually, even if you've not had pests for a while. Congrats. Sorry to burst the bubble, it will happen at some point. And people really clocking in, and I know this is going to sound silly, but you would be surprised, people clocking back into the fact that plants are living things. They are not just decoration. There was a few years back, quite a few years back, where I was having certain conversations with people going, oh, I need to have this plant here because aesthetically it makes this room look fabulous. And it's just like, so the plant that needs a whole bunch of light, you're going to put it in a dark space. Well, yes, I'm going to put it there because I need a splash of green. And I'm just like, okay, that's not going to live there. And it's fine. It looks green in the place where it's like dull. And I'm just like, okay. So we're moving away from that, thankfully. Can you tell my opinion on that? I think there is value in aesthetics, as long as we don't ever forget that this is a living thing that still needs to survive and thrive, not just a decorative vase somewhere or a picture you can put up. But yes, sorry, I'll get off my soapbox on that one. But ultimately, what does this mean for plant collectors and the plant community out there? What do these predictions mean? It means we're going to be more keyed into specific plants, their care, looking for nuance, looking for reasons, looking for the why. The collections are going to be smaller, more on purpose. There'll be more patience that we have for certain plants because you've actively made that decision that, you know what, I'm going to hyper-focus on these few plants. So you are going to be willing to wait for that. The kind of longevity of a plant rather than just the aesthetics and the rarity of it all. And there's going to be a lot more people that with their entire chest these days are going to be saying, you know what, that plant is not for me. Rather than a lot of people, and there is no shame because that's what it was like a few years ago, where like I can give you an example of myself. I use the same examples, like the Milano Crisis was never a plant that I particularly wanted to have in my collection, but everybody else was having it, and I'm just like, well, okay, I guess I'll have it as well. Irony is, just to spite me, because I've been trying to get rid of it for years, it's now growing the happiest that it has ever grown, and the leaves are the biggest it's ever been, and it doesn't have any pest issues. Just to spite me. Still in my collection. But again, you can see how that's tipped then, where I'm just like, oh, this plant wasn't a plant that I ever really wanted and I should have got rid of it years ago. The fact that I haven't got rid of it and it's got to the point now where I've had it for years and it's grown okay and it's grown to big enough size, now that puts value on that plant for me. Cannot say the same about the Pink Princess. But you know, but I encourage all of you to release some of that guilt that you might be having about your collection or your plants and all of these things in 2026. Adjust your expectations. It's fine because everybody else is doing it as well. It's completely fine to adjust your expectations to something that is manageable for you and your care and your collection. And also, I encourage you to redefine what success means like for you, your plants, and your collection. What does that success look like to you? Maybe as a quick thought, without overthinking it too much. 1 or 2 words or a sentence down below in the comments, let us know what success looks like for you in your collection for 2026. But ultimately, and I'll kind of close off on this, is that the hobby isn't shrinking, it's stabilizing. And there's something to be said about that as well, because when it was huge in the pandemic years and even slightly tapering off the back of that, it wasn't stable. That was always going to be a bubble. It was always going to burst and things were going to come down, but it's stabilizing. And I can tell you because I've dealt with a lot of people who've been dealing with houseplants for a very long time because of what I do here. The conversations I am having with people now versus a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago are entirely different. They are much more stable conversations. These are people that are true, passionate people about this. They weren't people that were only going to ever be there for a year, 6 months, a couple of years and then disappear. These are people that are in it for the long run, and it's different. But ultimately, 2026 is going to be a year of keeping plants alive and thriving and maybe getting them bigger or fitting more of our space rather than just keeping up appearances. But quickly, what of these predictions do you agree, disagree? Have you got any of your own? Let us all know down below. And yes, hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully I shall see you here soon. And I truly, truly hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.